he's like the ultimate tactician. He's like the ultimate chess master. He's not
Mm,
quite a puppet master. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, and I feel like the story kind of wants to have one, and Sabayoth ain't it. Like Sabayoth wants to be that, you know.
Yeah.
It
But
really
you know,
isn't. I said before how it could have been like four book series rather than a 3 one. That would have served it
yeah,
well, but it could have even been a 5 book series. You know, I mean, and you're
Mhm.
the person who's never wanting things to just go on for the sake of going on. You know, none
no,
of us
not
are.
really.
We
I'm like
like
a
things
fan.
having an ending, but this feels like there was so much
Yeah.
more material to work with on the Thrawn side that we could have seen greater explored if we'd had just 1 or 2 more books.
I was gonna ask what we thought of like Mara, like just as a like a thematic through line, you know, like for her character. Like what do we think of all this?
I think it was very strong. I really did feel like her arc, again, not just in this book, but just in the trilogy overall, was probably the strongest, if I'm being honest. Like, if you're going for just this book trilogy for full consistency, I would argue she suffers the least over the course of the 3 books.
I think I would have redone her intro into the story because of what Thrawn is, like this force that was out on the outskirts. I think I would have had the Emperor post Mara as his Vader, like his executor.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, and welcome back to Fanalysis Star Wars. I'm Callum, this is Matt,
Hey guys, welcome.
and this is Evan.
Greetings.
Rounding off the Thrawn trilogy today with the last of the 3 books, The Last Command, appropriately titled. I think we're all of like minds on this one, right, guys? Slight dip compared to the first 2, but still a lot of positives to go along with it.
Yeah, it's
It's my
still a
least
solid
favorite.
experience in and of
Mm.
itself, but yeah, it is definitely the weakest of the trilogy overall.
I think we all remembered that from our first readings years ago as well, right? I think, Matt, you mentioned in one of our previous discussions that was going to be the case.
Yeah, in fact, this is only the second time I've been through it. I've never read it a second time
Mm.
before we decided to go through it as a group. I've been through the first two or three times a piece. I don't know why, but the middle one is my favorite. I think it's just the
I
tone
think I
of
probably
everything.
agree
I
with
like
that as well.
Lando
Yeah,
in
there's a
that
lot of
book.
fun
Ditto,
adventure
yeah.
stuff happening, particularly with the Han Lando side that we talked about last
Yeah.
time. I
Mhm.
enjoy that.
But the first one obviously is, you know, really good and sets the bar for this and introduces like the dynamic of like Thrawn and everything on his side of the equation and what he's bringing. I think Talon Card is a very interesting character in that
Mm.
book, not so
Mhm.
much in this one. You know, this book to me, I don't dislike it. I think we said before the recording that none of us have any serious like nothing stood out to us as really terrible, right? We
Mm.
just for whatever
No,
reason,
nothing
yeah.
awful, just structurally, it's the weakest, and I think for me personally, it really does feel like Timothy Zahn. He had 3 very specific sequences in this book in mind that he really, really wanted to write, and then he just kinda wrote around them in order to kind of fill it out. At least that's how it
Hmm.
really came off to me, because there are some really powerhouse sequences in this book. The 3 that always stood out to me were the sequence with Thrawn and his troops, initially
Hmm.
after Luke escapes, and they have that
Hmm.
promotion scene with the lieutenant.
Hmm.
Then the second is the birth of Jason and Jaina, and then the third is actually the climax itself, the final fight with Sabayoth. All 3 of those sequences, like I don't know what it is, but just the writing quality in them just really stands out compared to the rest of the book. So it really does feel like he was really putting his
Yeah.
forward when he did that.
Uh,
Again, not that the rest of it is bad. It just kind of feels like
yeah.
okay, then this is happening, then this is happening, and oh, there's this amazing sequence. Okay, now we're just gonna do random stuff. You know what I mean?
Obviously, we'll get to the climax when we get to it. I won't get into that right now, but I definitely agree that the writing, in particular, in all those sequences, but especially the first two, like the quality is. I don't know if quality is the right word I want to reach for here. It's just my interest kind of like
Mm.
was
Yeah, the
stronger there.
substance, maybe not the quality, but the
Yeah,
substance nature of the scenes really, really stands out there.
maybe it's the like
Um,
the emotional depth of it or something, you know what I mean? I mean, just I don't know. It's difficult to explain because a lot of this book to me. Oh, Callan, why don't you give your thoughts like real bit before I go on?
Well, just kind of
Um,
echoing what you two were saying, I think one of the things that stands out for me is this book feels like it could have been and I don't think it would have been stronger than the current second book by all means, but in another trilogy, this could have been like a second book or even a first, and it would have had greater strengths if you take away the latter third of the
mhm,
climactic style. It
mhm.
doesn't
mhm.
feel like the conclusion of a grand trilogy the way the first 2 books kind of built up to have
Yeah,
earned, in my
Yeah,
opinion. The
yeah,
first 2/3 of this just feel like kind of run of the mill, good, solid, fun Star Wars action. They don't feel like this kind of rising bridge towards what we get in the final third. And the final third, of course,
mm,
even though I agree it's very well written, also is kind of aping on what we've seen with a lot of the closing
Of course.
act of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
which of course
Yeah.
that's some of that is the nature of Star Wars, some of that's intentional. I mean, most of it's intentional, but the impact to that is that we've kind of seen this before. It's not like we said about Sabayoth. None of us are big fans of him as a character. Everything good about him in the final trilogy or final climax of this book rather, we've seen before from the Emperor and better, and you know, with the themes more closely woven together. You know, we'll get to the details of that later, but I just felt that everything we're seeing here could have been stronger. And
Can I ask a question just based on what you were just saying there? Can I ask
Yeah,
a
yeah.
question? We call this today the Thrawn Trilogy. If going by this book, does that feel correct?
No,
Like this,
no, Thrawn is
okay.
very much ancillary to the discussion here. That's part
Yeah.
of the problem. The whole thread. It feels like this was almost Be Better as a quadrilogy. Like this was the third of a four series book series. I think
was gonna
that would
say
be
something like that. Yeah.
the ebb and flow to it would work stronger. It doesn't quite have that oomph that you need in the close of a trilogy like this, particularly like we say, the titular character being Thrawn. He fizzles out, you know, in terms of plot significance, in terms of presence in this book. Aside from the first portion, like you said, Evan, one of the strongest scenes is when he's raising up the
That's literally his best
officer.
scene in the book, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's
Like, when he
so
raises
good
that-
that I remembered it being like tail end of first book or early second book. Like, I remembered it being quite close on the back of the initial kind of the setup to that. You know, when he's taking out one of the earlier officers, and then this is kind of the bit where the bit that stands out to me is Pelion saying, "Now he has them. You know, now they will follow him into battle. Now he's earned their." That I thought from memory, you know, decade plus ago, was that earlier in the series. The fact that it happened at the start of this book to me seems misplaced, because it's the kind of thing that would earn you not just as the officers and the military servicemen within the story, but also as a reader would earn the support and the backing of Thrawn as a character would happen much earlier on. It seems late. It seems like late to have it here.
Right. Actually, and just to read exactly what you were saying there, Callan. It's the quote basically goes, "Yesterday, the Chimera's crew had trusted and respected the Grand Admiral. After today, they would be ready to die for him. And for the first time in 5 years, Pelion finally knew in the deepest level of his being that the old empire was gone. The new empire, with Grand Admiral Thrawn at its head, had been born."
Now that's the close of the first
Fantastic
book.
crescendo.
Yeah, that's the close of the first book, if you ask me. That's where that should be
Yes.
placed, leading you into the second, where you kind of you're amping on that, you're ramping it up, you're bringing kind of that Empire Strikes Back energy without the Empire ever having lost in the first book, to show the kind of difference and the contrast with the original trilogy that's going to be made clear in this series. And then you have the third book kind of hammering that in, and they're almost on the cusp, but then the Republic start to fight back. It feels like the big kind of rising climax we're expected here fizzles out with everything concerning Thrawn. And it focuses entirely on Sabayoth, who all of us, I think, agree is the weaker part of the antagonist
I do. However, I have to say, because I hadn't been through any of these books for a while. I'd been through the other two books more times, like I just said. But he actively annoys me in the first book, and I think he does get better as the series goes along. So even though he's by far less interesting character to me than... I want to be careful how I say this. I think I've come around to the view that I think I like the idea of Thrawn more than like anything Thrawn really actually is. Because it's more because of the structure. I think that's what you were just speaking to. Like you keep the character pretty much exactly the way he is, and just structure the story different. I think he's much stronger. I think he's almost a romanticized idea, because he's kind of become like what we all think of as the point of this trilogy. But this book in particular, I mean, it's Sabayoth driving it, like, and he's like the climax of it, really.
To the point where Thrawn even suffers in plot form, because Thrawn makes really stupid mistakes concerning Sabayoth that doesn't make any sense. And like you say, Mara is the key on the protagonist side. Like, she's the focus. Even the characters that you're enjoying watching, like Card and Leia and Han, obviously, they're operating basically in a sphere around Mara. She's the driving force here from start to finish. And that's appropriate, you know. I don't begrudge that. I think that's a cool part of the series. But it's just because it's Thrawn's book, it just seems like, no, this would be a Mara trilogy. You know, second Luke Skywalker kind of running would make more sense there.
Yeah, I mean, how she's handled is not the issue. It's actually, I feel like the biggest flaw of this book overall is how the cast in and of themselves are, you know, each put in these different scenarios, because I don't know, like, to me, it just doesn't feel like there's as much agency with our main cast, or as much growth throughout. I mean, like, I'm just gonna ask you straight up, like, what is Luke's arc in this book?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
He's become Ben Kenobi for
yeah.
Mara, basically.
Yeah,
And
I
not a
that's
very
it.
I
strong one.
think
Like it's not that's not threaded through the story. It just kind of happens as we go through the plot. You know, even
Mhm.
even even as it comes up in the when they're traveling across the planet Wayland, he's just like, oh, I guess I should probably teach you some stuff, right? It's basically
Exactly.
just in case we need it. There's no
my
there's no thematic thread there from start to
Lu
finish.
Luke in this book is done well, but he's incredibly vanilla in how
Mm,
yeah.
he's sort of, like, written, which, again, one of my favorite aspects about the previous book, Dark Force was his arc and him sort of, coming to terms with being a Jedi outside of the combative elements to it, the negotiations that he had to go through, again, one of my favorite scenes in the trilogy was that from the previous book, but you don't get nearly that same agency here. Honestly, like, the only time Luke himself really kind of broke from the mold for me personally was when he was talking with Mara about the possibility of training Jason and
yeah,
Jaina when
I
they
was
get
going to say
older.
the same
That was
thing.
really good. I really like when Mara asks him, what he plans to do. And actually, sorry, let me rephrase. Luke says that he has reservations. Mara's like, well, what do you mean? You teach them how to use lightsabers, teach them how to be good people, teach them how to feel the Force. That's it, right? But then Luke says, essentially, like, no, being a Jedi is more than that. I'm like, ooh, that's good, because I like how that follows up from Dark Force, where he realizes, no, being a Jedi is more than what I've been doing. Again, that in and of itself is really good, but that's basically his highlight in the entire
Yeah.
book in and of itself. Again, the rest, he's just vanilla Ben Kenobi. And again, I'm usually the first one to defend. Like, I like Luke Skywalker. Even vanilla Luke Skywalker is great to me. But if I'm being honest, his agency is a pretty noticeable downgrade in this book. And
Yeah.
also, we were talking about Lando Calrissian. Lando might as well not even be in this book. He's barely
Yeah,
even in it, and he
big
doesn't even
drop
have much
off.
of an
He's purely
arc and all, which
ancillary
is
to
very
this. Yeah.
disappointing. Like, he's literally the impetus for telling us the history of the Dark Force in the previous book, and he's barely in this one. That's genuinely disappointing. I hate to say it.
My issues with this, like everything you're talking about with agency for the main cast, the returning cast, everybody aside from Mara pretty much feels kind of sidelined. You know what I mean? Which again, I'm not complaining about her coming to the forefront because she's well done and everything. It just feels like these complaints or these issues kind of mirror my feelings about Return of the Jedi as a film. Is that
Mm,
like there's a really great like climax in there, everything to do with like Vader and Luke and the Emperor in the throne room and everything. That's all perfectly done. Well, I say perfect. I still think it's silly the way the Emperor actually gets killed. But anyway, but thematically, I would say
mm.
perfectly done. Right, most of that, 99.9% perfect. Right. Uh, what is Han doing in that film? Well, he's frozen for a lot of it. Then he gets out and he's ineffectual and blind, and then he's General Solo. That's so essential to the war effort,
Hey
and we're
man,
going
he
to stick
defeated
him.
Boba Fett.
We're going to stick him outside a door
Exactly.
on Endor. You know what I mean? It's like
It's
he's
effectively
gonna.
two films. That film, it's
Yeah,
two halves. It's
Yeah.
very clear
yeah,
cut. And the fact that it's trying to
yeah.
ape on that here, in a
And then
in a way,
Leia and
better to be honest,
Han,
but still.
Leia and Han don't have as much tension in that because it's kind of already had its best peak, and the only thing is like he kind of thinks like Luke's moving in on it, but that's until she clarifies, no, he's my brother. It's like, oh, okay, never mind, well,
Mhm.
And it
movie's
has
over
that
now,
infamous
great.
like visual
you know
reaction. He's like, wait, what?
The epic shock face.
yeah,
Still,
yeah,
still
Love that
fantastic.
shot.
Still-
It's
yeah.
so
But
good.
and then the Jabba stuff's all fun, has nothing to do with anything
Hmm.
really. You know what I mean? It's a good movie, it's a fun movie, and the ending of it, the climax, is really strong, but the cast of characters, that most of them aren't accomplishing a lot on screen.
Mm.
They're there, but it doesn't feel like they're doing exactly or all of what they easily could be doing, what you want to see them doing. Nowhere near as strong as what's going on in Empire, for example, like as a film, just in
Mhm.
terms of the way the plot is driving everything in such a natural, to such a natural crescendo.
Mm.
This, I don't know. Everybody kind of feels a little shortchanged. And at the same time, it still has good writing. I also feel like this book, maybe I'm just forgetting, but I felt like it was constantly calling back to stuff that happened in the movies in the way that the previous two didn't, like, really, like, kind of like tap the glass at me, like in the same way. They were always pointing out scenes that happened in the films themselves. Um, did you guys notice that?
I think
Is this
I
just
I think
me?
that's
mean, now that I
mostly
think
comes
about
down
it,
to the similarities within the plot. Like I don't think it's so much the
y-
individual references they're getting that are more significant,
It
but
was
it's
the fact
how
that characters
similar.
would actively remember that,
Yeah,
like, they were
right.
literally, "Oh, this reminds me of that time on Bespin. This reminds me of that
yeah,
time on
and on top
Dagobah.
of
This
that, you're
reminds me
getting
of
a
that
lot
time
of
on
them that
Hoth."
weren't in the films. That they're referencing things from the past in general, so it feels like there's more referencing from
Mm,
what we've seen with the originals, even though it's not specifically that content.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a lot of looking back and forth on different things they've done, and what you say about the rest of the plot, you're kind of not feeling as naturally tied to the crescendo. That's the biggest key here for me, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
But one of the things about that as well is that it feels very real. Like the story, particularly the amount of time we spend focused on the smuggler side of things, right? The whole story feels like, oh yeah, this is how this would play out. Like there's a lot of happenstance, there's a lot of change of plans at the last minute, there's a lot of misinterpretation, etc. Characters feel naturally kind of pushed along and are kind of flying by the seat of their pants and don't feel as thematically grounded as in the previous two books, which is fine. I like that kind of storytelling a lot of the time. I like the kind of realistic approach. But because you have that at the tail end of the trilogy, because you have that as the lead in to the big climax, it just, like you said, it means everyone's kind of feels like they don't have a firm footing within the story. They're just kind of agents for the plot. Again, you don't not the kind of thing you want to be using for a close out to a trilogy this powerful, especially when it's so divorced from Thrawn. They have no overlap with Thrawn at all. Like they're just completely independent of him. I mean, they don't have any. The main cast, not one of them encounters anything he has to do for the entire story, unless you count Coruscant, which is only a hey, stay here, don't leave for now. You know, it's so
Well, I mean,
secondary.
yeah, and like people have criticized, this trilogy over the years, like saying, "Oh, why did Luke and Leia, and Han never like meet Thrawn in person?" I've never had a huge, issue
don't
with
need
that
that by
personally,
any
but
means.
it is something worth pointing out. Like the only person in the main cast who ever, confronts him face to face in any capacity is actually Mara in the previous book, which isn't, again, not a bad thing, but it is something worth pointing out. I think it's
And
also
Card, of
worth saying
course.
too, Callan. Oh yeah, and Card. Also, to your point though, Callan, like this book, there's a lot of just this is gonna sound silly, but there is just a lot of just people standing around talking. And again, I know it's a book, which is kind of how these things go. But a lot of the discussions to me, like, yes, there's that realism element there, Callan, but at the same time, like, there's a lot of sequences to me, honestly, that just kind of felt like they were kind of burning time. Like the conflict between Garn Bel Iblis and Mon Mothma during the Coruscant battle. Why was that there?
That's really funny because that's one of the things that stuck out in my brain. That's one of the things I fondly remembered about this series.
Really?
That scene when they have the reconciliation, I really like that. But the problem with it is that it shouldn't be happening in that moment. That's like
That's
really
what I mean.
nice
The writing is great, but and again, even Leia is like, "Can you do this at a different time?" It's like,
and the fact that it's like, no, this isn't my pride. Like with the previous book, this is a Mon Mothma thing. Like I can't help because I'll just get in the way and make things worse. Like the idea is brilliant, but the execution is like, well, I mean, you could just jump in, take over, and then deal with the friction afterwards. Like people are dying up there right now. Like you're potentially losing the battle because of the execution wasn't there, but the idea I really loved, and the concept of Mon Mothma.
But it doesn't read like what it's telling us. I think that's the real issue because he says it's not pride. But again, it's like in this situation, it's hard to really come to any other conclusion, even if you know that's not the case as it's presented. And I think that's the problem. The drama feels not artificial in the conflict, but the setting lets it down.
Yeah,
and I think that's the biggest issue for me. And again, I get, and Leia being kind of the audience, stand-in about like, oh, like this isn't the time to do this. Please, you have to rise above this. I get it, but just because you're being ironically crass doesn't come off as any more disjointed, at least to me in that sequence. Again, like I agree with you, Callan. The dialogue itself is great, but the setting, like I was saying before, it's just it just comes off as clunky, honestly.
I completely agree.
It didn't need to be presented in that way, is what I'm saying, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the part I like about it is the Mon Mothma side. It's the fact that she's in how it ties to Leia and Han and the rest. Like she's so unwilling to trust others with the responsibility and the burden that she has, based on the fact that the decisions she makes, affect lives. I love that idea for her. I love the idea for the conflict with the characters. The well-meaning kind of, well, can you let me and my husband have some time off? Is that, well, not really, because I don't have anyone else to pass this to. I can't trust anyone else. Really cool idea. And this goes slightly back to your point about Thrawn not having a face-to-face with the heroes, right? Some people criticizing that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't need that. I think that him being that detached away, across the battlefield admiral that never actually meets him face-to-face, that's fine. But what we need to have in place of that then is the protagonists have to have some kind of story purpose and connection and drive to having put the people in opposition to Thrawn. Like, for example, the situation with Akbar. First book and second book, the resolution of him being cleared and being brought back into the fold as an admiral, right? Because of the character's active kind of presence within that. The fact that they dealt with that was a problem they solved. They made sure that Akbar was there in position to take over and be in opposition to Thrawn. If they hadn't done that, he wouldn't have been there to fight him. That's them kind of setting the board. Our characters having the agency of the story of making sure the board is set against Thrawn. Akbar, Garn Bel Iblis, all of these people making sure failure is out the way. just making sure the board's set and the galaxy's stable based on their decisions, that lets you kind of have the protagonist, the antagonist aspect of going against Thrawn without it being an actual confrontation physically between the main heroes, letting them kind of take the sub-off route at the end of the trilogy. But because, I mean, apart from anything else, Akbar just isn't here. Like, him being cleared is basically irrelevant. His Garm takes his place. Like, you need to have those pieces laid out early in the trilogy to then come to fruition here as to have the payoff to the setup. We don't have that. And on top of not having that, like we say, there's such a detachment from the main antagonist of Thrawn here with the main characters because they have no connection to him now. They don't have to physically meet him, but they are not opposing him directly. That he's just a phantasmal, Eye of Sauron style presence threat in the background that they kind of deal with, but then get distracted by Sabaoth. It's just a shame because, like we said before, like in the previous reviews, these characters are so strong. Even the secondary ones, the ones that we haven't seen in the original trilogy, the people coming in with like Mara and Card, we enjoy these characters, but they don't have as much story relevance here because everything they're doing is kind of secondary or tertiary within the plot. You get a few beats like we have with Leia having the kids. Not really relevant to the trilogy. That's going to be something that comes up later on in the EU, but it's a powerful scene. We have...
Well, I mean, I would disagree on that a little bit. I mean, I like the representation of this is like a new, like literally the birth of like a new generation, new hope sort of thing. This is what we're fighting for. I think that's fine, but
No,
yeah.
for sure.
I
But,
mean,
but in terms of
you're
the
not
story,
expecting-
why
you're not
did it have to
expecting them
happen
to be
then?
actual characters
What
at the
about the story was served by it happening exactly at that moment? It didn't tie in with the victory of against Thrawn, or tie in with the stress of them having those children at that exact moment when everything else is happening, etc. It didn't have any overarching story purpose to happen in that moment, which it could have done. Little small victories, like the
aside
thing
from
with
Sabaoth wanting them too, I guess. but
yeah,
even
of
that's
course,
kinda
yeah,
scary
and the
at
fact that
the
you need to have
end.
Leia not pregnant when she goes out to do the climax action scene
Yes.
because she can't be pregnant during that. I understand why it happened, but just it could have been tied better into the overall story. And things like small victories like the Delta Source, right? That didn't really have any relevance to the story. It didn't. It was great. He was no longer being spied on. Or they were no longer being spied on by Thrawn at that point. But it didn't affect the outcome of the engagement. He still saw straight through their
Mhm.
illusion, their ruse. If he'd perhaps fallen for that as a result of the Delta Source that they were using against him, like they were planting seeds, and he thought, oh, I know this isn't fake because I heard it from Delta Source that I've trusted all this time because they're beating it, etc. That would have had relevance, but instead it's just time kind of wasted. It's a really cool idea as well. I like the kind of idea of it as a function, as a key, MacGuffin within the story, very neatly applied, but lots of page space spent for basically no reward. And I just feel like that was one of the main consequences of how this book was laid out across the entire story. That the plot's there, it feels real, it feels natural for the most part, but there's no like holistic tying together on a thematic or powerful story level the same way we've had with the previous two books.
Yeah.
Mhm. I also feel the same way about like the reveal of like Winter's past and her like her dealings like in information and her keeping it so down low even from the other members of the New Republic. I like that in concept, but like as far as the actual plot of this book is concerned, it really doesn't have much overall impact to the overall narrative. Again, I appreciate the fact that they're making her more three-dimensional, but at the same time, if it doesn't end up really serving much influence to the overall plot, it just kind of feels like, okay, this is a thing.
And
Winter
also,
had this past, and it sort of helped them do this at one point, but again, it's like, again, like ultimately with the Delta Source, it doesn't end up working in their favor anyway. So what's
yeah.
the point?
And I really like her as an idea for a character, but she isn't really that three-dimensional anymore. They're putting some splashes in. One of my favorite beats of the entire series for her is when she's remembering, like she's seeing a physical trigger before her eyes that creates quite powerful resonance for her with a pre-existing memory, kind of showing the curse and downside to having that perfect memory like she has. Really cool. And it fleshes her out as like a bit more than a plastic cardboard cutout that's just there for plot relevance. But aside from little beats like that, she's basically just there to make sure someone's there to look after the twins and also stand in for Leia and serve that kind of function of I have this memory. There wasn't enough done with her in the story to justify her existence on page as much as we like her. And I think that she's one of the examples where that was a weaker delivery compared to everyone else with Card, Mara, etc. Even the other smugglers, like the smugglers in this, have a lot of texture and interest. Is it Mazik? What's his name?
Mazik, yeah.
It is Mazik, yeah. He was kind of not really relevant to the overall trilogy as a whole, but he had a strong presence within the story. Same with Niles, as much of an arse as he was. Aves and Gent. These people have more kind of relevance and significance, even if what they end up doing for the most part didn't have to kind of affect the full trilogy. It just kind of did within this latter third. It feels like he wanted to do more of the smugglers later on in the EU that he didn't know was going to exist as a result of this trilogy, and was setting up a lot of world building. But that wasn't obviously what he was trying to do. So
yeah, I mean, he gave them all very strong personalities, so you remember them even if their actual like contributions are fairly surface level. So, and I agree with you. He definitely feels like he has certain. You could definitely feel like in his writing that he has certain characters that he particularly enjoys, working with versus others. Which, I mean, I know that's every writer to an extent, but in this book in particular, it really does feel that way.
And so much of it on the smuggler side of things. Sorry, Matt.
Oh no, it's okay. I was kind of just gonna jump off the smuggler thing because I agree with what you say, but I mean, applying that even to like Thrawn, is there a strong thematic reason to kill him off in this book? Like,
No.
why not just
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why not just wrap up the Sabayoth plot and go, well, Thrawn's still out there, and like we still got like a galaxy to rebuild, and that threat, he's still there. I don't quite, because that's kind of what he was in the first place anyway. Was this thing that kind of resurged out from nowhere, like Jaws or something. And so it's like, why not keep that? And it does feel like this is kind of forcing a capstone piece to a story that wants to keep growing.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of what the point I was going to bridge. That was what I wanted to speak to, because you were talking about building up the smugglers and Winter and all these other people that don't really have that much to do in this particular story. Not that any of it's particularly wrong. It just feels like kind of almost like less like a half-baked movie and more like a TV show that got canceled and like has like a slapped together ending or something.
I said before how it could have been like four book series rather than a 3 that would have served it well, but it could have even been a 5 book series. I mean, and you're the person who's never wanting things to just go on for the sake of going on. None of us are.
Really.
We like things having an ending, but this feels like there was so much more material to work with on the Thrawn side that we could have seen greater explored if we'd had just 1 or 2 more books, or even just let it into the greater EU and have him be more of a continuous presence for a while. Not that again that was something they were aware was going to happen before they wrote this book. He wrote this book, but but just it seemed like a missed opportunity. And even if you take that aside, the way he dies in the story, I mean, we don't even get to see his contributions to the battle even that much. It's all so off page and taking such second string to everything going on with Sabayoth. There's no great fleet battle that he's winning them massively and everything's going super well because of his contributions. He just cuts to him mid battle and then he's dead, and then it fails. We don't get to see that celebration of everything that he's been set up to be. It's almost like that was what the purpose of the Coruscant battle was. It was like, we don't have time for this at the end. Let's stick it in the middle here, have that be his thing, and then he doesn't have to spend so much time with it at the climax, which to me was a major misstep.
Yeah. I mean, I like the fact that the Nogri were ultimately his undoing. I feel like that in itself was very well set up over the course of the trilogy. That's not the issue, but I agree. It would have been probably a bit more fitting if the battle were actually going on versus it just happening right beforehand. So, and to your previous point, yeah, I do often get the feeling that maybe Zahn underestimated just how big of a boom Thrawn as a character, ended up becoming later on, because so much, like, he's referenced so much in the material that comes after this. I mean, the hand of Thrawn duology is literally like, all about this. And then of course you have things like, Outbound Flight, where you see him. It's the prequel, which is Outbound Flight is basically the prequel to this entire trilogy, because you see him meet Sidious for the first time and all that.
Is that the book where Dorian is a big character?
Yes.
It's that one, right? Okay, that's right. Okay, we were mixing him up with someone else from Naboo, one of in our Plagueis chat. One of our it's neither here nor there. One of Palpatine's underlings. We were calling him wrong in the other review, but anyway, Thrawn. I think it's funny how this is Star Wars tradition. Everybody likes Boba Fett, even though he's like there for 5 minutes. Then he dies in like a stupid way.
Aesthetic of
Darth
nothing
Maul,
else.
like Phantom Menace, like was are marketed as the Darth Maul movie, and he fights a couple times and then gets cut in half.
Thrawn in particular was so well known for that. He was the first thing that the new canon reached for when they realized, we've failed straight out of the gate, like immediately falling flat on our face day one of rebooting all of this. Quick, let's reach for the EU stuff. What was the best? What was the earliest? What set off all the first time? Thrawn. The fact that they use that, it shows you just how much of a power and impact he had on the kind of lore of the world and the setting. But yeah, like you say, Evan, it's not the fact that he got killed by the Nogri was problem. It was just the timing, and the idea is brilliant. Having the Nogri be his undoing, but not only is the timing of the individual scene weird and so like, and then we're done and we're moving on. It comes out of nowhere, but also the fact that we get earlier in was it this book or the end of the second book? I can't remember. I think it was this one Whereas like something wrong with the Nogri. Anyway, and just completely disregards it, and then sends Sabayoth to go back to Wayland, the seat of his entire, the keystone of his entire imperial ambition at this stage. He must not lose Wayland under any circumstance because of the importance of the resources of the clones, etc. And he's like, yeah, we can just send him over there, it'll be fine, and we'll send him without any restraints and just a random general without any protection, etc. Or the mistakes he's making in this to set up everything with Sabayoth is just, to me, completely unbelievable based on the fact that he's so laser focused on seeing through everything with the rebellion or the
what are we
Republic.
supposed to understand from that? Like, honest question. Like, what is Thrawn's take? He genuinely doesn't give a shit about the Force that much. Like, he underestimates it that much that
apparently, while also wanting to set up.
I mean,
that could be like a blind side. That could be a flaw in his character, except it's not, because we know that he specifically wants to set up a homegrown, less insane Sabayoth in the future for the purpose of having that kind of Force influence. It's just a really.
I'm sorry, I did not like that plan.
It's a stupid plan. That's why it's a dumb plan. He's putting all his faith in this Salamir to protect him, and also not sending Salamir with him on the ship to make sure the people he's sending don't go AWOL. The whole thing just screams of, well, we've got to wrap this up, and he has to make some mistakes somewhere. And instead of seeing those mistakes kind of set up by the actions of the protagonists and earned by the victories they've laid along the way, even things with the Nogri, them maybe intercepting some messages and skewing things and changing plans at the last minute or whatever, we don't get to see the failures of Thrawn be set up victories for the protagonist, or vice versa. Just utterly simple mistakes. The amount of times he'll make the exact perfect prediction, and this happens on both sides of the conflict, New Republic and Thrawn. Like, Garnbale Liblis is the Republic equivalent, basically. He'll, oh yeah, I can see exactly through this. This is the thing that it must be. Just the fact that he doesn't paint in, alternates, like maybe it's this, maybe it's that, not sure. Or both sides don't make enough mistakes to be realistic and believable. Like we said before, Thrawn's basically just magic in how he's making these interpretations. Playing with that space more and the kind of fog of war and the general realism involved, given how well formed most of the rest of the story and the plot is around that idea of realism, I think was a bit of a missed opportunity, particularly in how he set up the ultimate conclusion for Thrawn.
I think these dynamics tend to work a little bit better in like Star Trek stories, because a lot of it is about bluffing your opponent, and you can kind of like talk through the psychology of it. And it's yes, there's a lot of tactics and sci-fi speak and assumptions made and appeals to like history or jurisprudence or whatever. Like but I mean at the same time, a lot of it is just, okay, I know I'm kind of BSing here, but hopefully they'll fall for it, like kind of a thing, or like
that's really what the whole asteroid thing is about. I mean,
and
a really cool idea as well that's been set up in the previous stuff. So
it's just not quite.
I will say that I do like that. Like the master strategist, his ultimate move is just throw big rock at thing. Like, I don't know. There's something. I know it's not like intentionally comedic, but there's something, I don't know, kind of funny about that. I always found it's like,
one of the I said about the fog of war issues a minute ago. One of them ties nicely with that. A positive example of that is them assuming, well, it must be way more. We found 22. That means we're not even close. That it must be at least 75, 120. I know it sounds like a small thing, but little pen strokes like that make the world feel more believable and real, because from the perspective of the people on the other side against him, they don't have any reason to doubt. If he's going to make this kind of move, he'd presumably do it with a lot more in the holster than just the 22. Having that misassumption or that assumption be falsely made and misunderstood by Leia, and she's expressing that in the story, it helps as a reader believe, okay, these are two sides that don't know what's going on either side. You as a reader have the information that they don't, and it just adds a lot of richness to it.
It's an example of a blatant stall tactic set up in a way to where it actually makes sense with the broader narrative, even though you could very clearly see what the point of it is from a writing perspective, massive credit there. Sorry, Matt, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
Just one thing to add to that, sorry, before. That's a perfect example of the story relevance, though, because what relevance is there to Coruscant bring out the war? He says, well, that's Coruscant effectively out the war. Great. What does that affect? Nothing. Nothing changes as a result of that. There's no story victory there. It's just
it's so Leia can't immediately join Luke and Mara on Wayland with Han, and
then
stuff.
she does anyway. See what I mean? There's no holistic thread tying this all together at any point. There's no relevance to it. Sorry, Matt.
I was going to say that on the holistic thread, though, that's the thing that is a good concept, because Leia and her dealings with the Nogri and sitting in their revelation about like the mistreatment of the Empire being cloaked as some kind of they're our saviors or whatever. That's really like a strong idea, and it carries over the course of multiple books. But Did Thrawn have anything to do with that? Like, I mean, or was he just the living embodiment of the Empire at this point? Like, from the
The
perspective
inheritor
of
of it, yeah. It wasn't his
yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
And it could have been. It could
So
have been
it's
something that
like
he'd put into place back in the day.
that's
Right.
another way you could tie it together is if he had been the orchestrator behind or using like his art stuff or whatever, like to figure out that's how they would that's how they would construe this or whatever and have like this long form deception in play because then it feels like vengeance at the end. He almost doesn't really feel like the villain of this piece to me. Like
Mm,
he in a way that I mean he's billed as like the ultimate Star Wars villain who's not from the main movies. You know what
yeah.
I mean? Like if that's how he's always been spoken about, and marketed as in the years, last 25 years, or so. Um, I just feel like these threads. I think what Evan said earlier is accurate. Like he has like had an outsized impact that wasn't quite predicted even by the guy who created him. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It does feel like he's become much more. He's like the selling point of this book, and I think that I was mildly disappointed, but that's a lot of it is because I didn't grow up with it. Like I said, the first book came out the year I was born, so it wasn't meant for me. I was a later generation to it. But by the time I had read it, I'd been through a lot of the other EU already. And so I was just like, well, yeah, this is good, but it's not like the best thing I've ever read, or you know what I mean? And
mm,
it's not necessarily my favorite Star Wars stuff either. And a lot of it, I think, is because of this ending. Like the first two books, I really do enjoy, and they nail the presence of the main characters, like the returning characters, the dynamic between them. You guys have spoken. I think Callan said in a previous uh maybe the first book that you can like hear the Star Wars music while you're reading
mm.
it,
Oh,
something like that.
100%, yeah.
You know, yeah, it's really good stuff. And I think I enjoyed this more the second time because I already knew going through it from years ago because the audiobook is really good. This is before they
Mm,
started getting really camp and over the top with the voice production and everything. It's even though it's the same narrator, so he's
yeah,
always
just
been
different
a
direction,
talented
clearly.
narrator. I
Mm,
think he's just being directed differently, yeah. But really, really good stuff. So I enjoy that. But it just plot tends not to be the thing I judge things on most. Like plot is less important. You know, it's there's
likewise.
a difference between story and plot. But this book, the plot is where it fumbles. You know, I think that's also true of Jedi, the film. You know what I mean? And so
Mm.
but the a lot of the story beats are still very good. And we've spoken a few times. We haven't really gone into it, but we've talked about the birth of the twins. We want to talk about what makes that scene powerful. Just to hone in
Yeah.
on that because we're
We
jumping around
Mm,
anyway. You
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, like this is definitely like in terms of the writing quality, really feels like a scene that Timothy Zahn really wanted to dive in, and I have to say, like it really does stand out. I mean, just in the sense of like the perspective of like Leia as like this is going on and her kind of reaching these the metaphysical aspect of it in the sense of like literally you are seeing new life enter the universe through the
Hmm.
perspective of but like it of the force in a way,
Mm,
Yeah.
which is a very
Well,
unique perspective that we've never really gotten up until this point, so it really does
yeah.
stand out
That's
you
the
know
thing that makes it signature in Star Wars, but I think it also would work if you took the Force out of it as just a mother having twins. You know what I mean? It's
mm,
yeah,
like it's a really powerfully done scene as just, oh, I'm a mother now. Like these things are
yeah,
alive now, and like and
mm,
they're having like they're gonna get the names. You know what I mean? That Han and I talked about already. You know, it's like they're real now. It's not just this idea. But then yeah, there is that bit of the Force, but it's also like there was a bit where she pondered about the fact that it's a little sad that Han won't be able to experience some of this because some of it's through, but there's also a point it's through the Force and he doesn't have that.
mm,
But there's a portion of it where it's kind of her like a meditation on what a mother might just go through. It's funny how they all like it's like this all these thoughts hit her at once, right? Which I guess is
mm,
really what
mhm,
happens. But she kind of jumps to the point. Well, at some point she doesn't say it, but she implies like I'll be dead, but they'll still have each other. There's a part of this bond that I won't
mhm.
that will belong to just them, not only
mm.
because they're
That twin
siblings, but
aspect,
because
yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah,
because I won't be around forever, so there's going to be a portion of their lives that I'm not, which is ironic, like given
Yeah.
where this goes.
well, yeah,
But
we didn't see where
yeah,
that was going. Well, also
yeah,
you could also, well, to your point on that one though, Matt, you could also look into it like from like her perspective, because like her and Luke didn't have each other at the
sure,
beginning. They didn't,
Mm,
sure.
even though they're them being twins as well. Obviously they were born at the same time, but
I'll
they
be honest.
didn't
I
grow up
sometimes
together.
forget that they are twins. Like
yeah.
Yeah,
it's like
Well,
they have to be because
yeah,
nothing else makes
exactly.
that's
sense
how
for the
it is.
plot. But I
Yeah,
sometimes forget that they are.
In retrospect as well, given what we see in the films, the fact that the lack of similarities and in fact high contrast between the birth of the twins here and the birth of the twins with Padme, and how
Mhm.
distinctly different they were, that it was there.
Well,
It's a
less
shame.
somber for one thing.
Well, yeah, it's a shame we didn't get to play with more of that as an active choice on Lucas's part. It could have been more of like let's try and draw some comparisons and bridges here. But yeah.
Yeah. But like again, though, like from her perspective, there's a layer to it in the sense of like, yeah, Luke and I didn't have what they're going to have because they have each other from the get go, and it's also very beautiful in and of itself. I would also just like to point out that in the comic book adaptation of this scene, when the twins are born, like way off and like into the sky, you could actually see like the Force ghosts of like Anakin, Yoda, and Ben, looking down on them as this is happening. That's like artistically, that's very beautiful, and I just wanted to point that out because obviously in the book that doesn't happen, but just something like I said I wanted to point out. Also, speaking of the comic, I think it is also worth mentioning that the comic adaptation of this book has the most cut out of it out of
I'm
the
not
entire
surprised by that.
trilogy.
Yeah,
I think
given what we've talked about,
that's worth pointing out.
yeah, given what we talked about with the kind of desync in the plot significance and the story relevance, I think that's an understandable thing to happen within the adaptation. There's a lot of this you can just cut out and affects nothing about the final outcome as it's presented. And which thing, like you said, Matt, it's
I really like a lot of the in and of themselves. I enjoy the wedge scenes. They're like, oh, just whatever,
we've got to have
just
wedge here.
yeah.
It's splashes of ingredients that just have no real relevance. We don't care about the plot. All three of us, we're all character driven people. We like themes more. We the plot is the least significant part, but the fact that you have such a densely packed, interwoven, connected plot here with such little story kind of power tying it together, and particularly the themes and not just within this book but the whole trilogy as a whole, it just feels such a weird final book. This needs to be 4 or 5 books, this series.
Yeah, just to talk about it, plot can be a problem for me when I think the plot is either nonsensical, i.e. something like Attack of the Clones, which is a fine idea, and we'll talk about that more in an upcoming video. But the pieces that there are key bits that make it unbelievable for me. So when a plot is underdeveloped, or when it's like this little bit overdeveloped, where it starts getting in the way and it's obtrusive, like there's a little bit too much going on, or too many. It's like people talk about like in books like these, we use language like cutting the fat, or this is extraneous, or this is filler. I don't think any of it's filler. None of it really is extraneous. It's not woven together in a way that makes it feel as compelling as it easily could if you just tweaked a few things here or there, or if the characters,
particularly because you don't have the time for it. Right. You know that the book is getting shorter and shorter as you read through it. That why are we spending this much time on this when we know we've got a whole finale to get through? It's costing finale page space at this stage.
Right. Yeah. It's not the content in and of itself. It's the structure and how it is presented. That's really what it really comes down to. Also, one final just thing I want to mention with this sequence is, I like the prose in the sense of like she's feeling through the Force as if like a metaphysical hand is like grabbing onto her finger, like babies often do. Again, I like that. It's a good bridge between the Force and then the physical world when it actually happens, because we see that later on when she's like taking care of them. I like that. It's really sweet. Just want to point that out. Also, something else though, I legitimately had forgotten until I reread this. Luke doesn't meet the twins in person.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah. The uncle connection is really loose, because we get so much of the focus on the Jedi side, but it's never like, oh, Uncle Luke. It's just, oh, Jedi Master Luke kind of thing,
Well, I mean, you do get Uncle that vibe later in other stories, but it's just like, I will say this. I genuinely feel like that's a flaw. I think that scene should have been in. Like, I would have liked seeing that, like the whole Luke, like when
it could have been it could have been the close of the trilogy, the last scene of the book. We talked about how his fear of training the
I
don't
twins, like the last scene of this book very much.
I know.
Not because it's a bad scene. It just feels like it shouldn't be the last scene in the book.
Exactly.
Like, it's a fine scene.
We need more power. But we talked about Luke's, one of the things that's strong about this is, and a strong concept for him as a story thread for this book would have been his, okay, I'm nervous about training the twins. I'm nervous about my training Jedi in general. I'm worried about this. It's a very, very powerful, very believable concern of his. Having the kind of the easing into that and the potential solution of that fear being Mara, and the thread through this book could have been him being more deliberately the Ben figure in this story, would have helped get around that. And the progress he makes with her and the success story of her backing up the success he's already had with Vader could have been like, okay, I'm now ready. I'm Ben's gone. We get one final smile from him, as he fades away, maybe into the background, and the handing off of the torch of the new Jedi destiny, etc. he's ready to receive he receives the twins from Leia and like say hello, say hi to your uncle, twins, and he receives them. Okay, I'm ready to take this next step on the journey, and it'd be ready to be what will then become what we know to be the Grandmaster Luke. If we had that story here, it would excuse some of the kind of the focus on Mara away from the main group here. It would explain why she's taking center stage as the main protagonist of this particular part of the trilogy. But even then, you need more time for all of this. This is too much stuff to happen in a trilogy that's supposed to be about Grand Admiral Thrawn. You need to have this be a longer series to kind of justify the time spent on Mara, on the smugglers, on Luke not being actively in the story, on Leia and Han doing everything on Coruscant. It just needs more time, which we don't get. Either shunt some of the stuff in the second book back a bit, which I don't advocate, or add more books at the end.
Mm-hmm. Also, like to that point though, Cal, like this wouldn't necessarily make what happens better, but you could also like that his trepidation and also his deep, hunger for knowledge and his sort of desire to learn as much about the Force. If there'd been more emphasis placed on that actually in itself could have maybe have been used as bit more justification for him going a little overboard when Dark Empire comes around, when Palpatine comes back, and him wanting to learn. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it would have made it better, but I'm saying you could have teed that up a little bit.
I'm with you. But but that should not have been the story that comes immediately after this one.
No, when we get to that, we'll have a lot to say. But I'm saying, like, I liked your idea there, Callan, because that in and of itself could have been used as somewhat of a justification. Not a full justification, and it wouldn't necessarily have helped, but I could see, like, it could have even been something for Palpatine to tempt him with, like, oh, you want to, train Jedi? Well, who has more knowledge?
Where I thought you were going for with that was Sabayoth. I thought it was going to give the excuse for him leaning into the Sabayoth, reliance. If it had been more of that in book
but he's learned that Sabayoth is like cuckoo.
No, for sure. But like, if that had been part of the story as to why he was susceptible to that in the first place, the fear of raising the twins. We saw glimpses of that in the second book, but it was never really the true focus of his arc. Sorry, Matt.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned it a few minutes ago, Calvin, that I don't like Dark Empire anyway, but particularly like you just said, the timing of it. Like it shouldn't be something that follows up pretty close after this. But
pretty much the next big story after this.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I don't think it should have happened at all. With the Luke just should not fall to the dark side, for example. But even if you're going to,
right?
not after.
I mean, we'll have a lot to say when we get to that.
Yeah,
I would like to say, because every time we mention it, somebody in the comments is like upset that we don't like it or questioning our thoughts on it. I would like to say, I've read that once a million years ago and I did not like it. But I promise, whenever we do it, I'll go into it with as open a mind as possible, and I'll try looking at it with fresh eyes, and I'll try to meet it on its terms. I think I'm with Callan though. I just don't like the core concept, but I'll go into it as objectively as I can, and at some point we'll give it a fair shake, and we'll look at it. But anyway, but getting back to the events of this here, what do we? I mean, it's kind of like
I think we should talk a little bit about the cloning plot or the lore that's explored there, because this in Dark Force, like they really did set up. I felt like oh, this book is where we learn about the Clone Wars and what that was. But
the whole character of Sabayoth is a relic of not knowing what those were. Yeah,
I don't say we get nothing from it, because we get a decent amount, but I don't think. Again, I feel like there might have been more that he wanted to explore there if he had been given maybe more books, because again,
I'm surprised he does as much as he does with it, to be honest. Yeah,
really?
I mean,
for me it felt a little undercooked, honestly.
Oh, well, I mean, considering what the actual story in the modern day is about, I mean, the clones effectively are just here's how we're gonna have infinite resources. We don't need to do conscription anymore, and you know what I mean. It's basically just a plot objective, right? It's not really like you don't think of this as like a story about clones, or at least I don't. Like,
no, you definitely don't. There's no focus of that on the actual original prequel films.
But he went so far as to talk about
part of it.
Like accelerated growth, like you know what I mean, which you almost wonder, did Lucas steal that idea? like when he got around to doing the prequels, you know what I mean? Because there was no reason, if you didn't know what the Clone Wars were, I don't think you would necessarily. They were all a Boba Fett's dad, and he, they became the stormtrooper. I think you probably were picturing something very different, like and Sabayoth himself being, they were cloning Jedi or cloning whoever, and like this mass scale, and like it was something a little bit more like
everyone was kind of going with at the time before when the prequels were coming out.
I think in Star Trek it's like I think it's like is it the Dominion Wars? But it's like a we're key figures in like across
Oh,
these
the
different
eugenics
sides of
wars.
eugenics wars. Okay,
Yeah.
well, there's different, and so there's just people of high repute are being cloned left and right, and who knows who. Like I thought that's probably where your mind might go, or you might
Yeah, I mean,
think,
just as a concept, you hear Clone
yeah,
Wars. Why would there be a war? Why would it be named the Clone Wars? It must be a war against clones. Or what's the general
yeah,
vibe of clones when
Right.
they're put into stories at this scale? Oh, it's replacement. Oh, it's replication. Oh,
Mhm.
it's the idea of the moral question whenever it comes to clones that you play with within stories, particularly during the set between the 70s and 90s. All that the tech fear
Mhm.
and the future fear and high philosophies
sure,
discussions, etc. People will be thinking it's going to be something along those lines, and then it just has
sure,
absolutely nothing to do with that. It's just the barest hint of relevance here in the main plot, which I'm not even opposed to.
yeah.
I think it's a weird choice to have them be clones within the early prequels. They didn't need to be, but I don't think Star Wars personally would have been helped by the high concept diving into the clones as a story choice.
Mhm.
For that matter.
I always
Yeah.
thought I thought that this is a little bit of a. I'll keep it brief. I thought it's a little side tangent, but I always imagined that the whatever force was threatening the Jedi and the Republic would be in command of the clones, and that would,
Mm,
and sure, you could have Palpatine on both sides of this, but it would be that's the reason why you have to then create a galactic army of just real people to
mm,
actually fight against this endless threat, and just take the droid armies out of it because droids are boring. Effectively, like, it's like
mm.
what instead it became droids versus clones.
Right.
So it's
A
like,
very
well,
odd
I
setup
didn't see
and
that coming, but okay,
yeah.
fine.
Particularly with
And
how
then
they
just
get
the
the clones,
stupidity of the
knowing that,
Jedi
yeah,
not
exactly.
pointing
We
out the
know
fact that
these
the
this
clones have
this is a
been being
conspiracy
built for
against
way
us,
too
but sure,
long.
we'll
Yeah,
use it.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Why not?
Like you
yeah.
have yeah, you have one of your own Cypher placing the order, but I'm
Can I
sure that's
just
not correct at all.
Can I just say, as like a teaser for the next time we do Plagueis, it's going to be we'll go into a lot of these topics more in depth. But I went through Attack of the Clones as a novel, which I don't know that I thought I had done. I don't think I ever had. But it's written by an author you both like, Salvatore. Uh,
Hmm. Oh,
Right,
he wrote the
Salvatore,
Salvatore.
yeah,
D&D books, right?
yeah.
It's surprisingly better, like, at least in, like, the first half of because the actual, like, conflict between the Separatists and the rest of the Republic is better teed up. Then it becomes just the same thing after a while.
Mm.
But the first opening bit of that book is much more like, "Where was this? I would like to be
Yeah.
watching this on
It's
screen."
just always
Um,
damage control
Eh,
when you come into
yeah.
the writing the books and the EU as a large. It's like, oh, damage
well,
control, damage
y
control.
You
Make the
also you
ideas
also
work.
get a
We talk about bloody
I actually
Plagueis and
remember from
everything that Lucino
yeah.
does.
I actually remember from that, like, you also get, like, an opening sequence between Shmi and Owen.
Yes,
Kinda
it's very good, actually. The whole opening bit is kind of it's weird because it's kind of between Shmi and Padme for no real reason. It jumps back and forth between them before you ever get to like the Jedi or anything else. But Shmi has like an extensive with the Lars family, like the whole of the
Mm.
Lars family, right? You see her for quite a while before she's kidnapped and taken away by the Tuscans, and it's really good. That should be in the movie. I've never thought I need more Shmi, but Shmi was really good in that. But
and
but
Owen's actually a character.
Mm.
yeah, but they do make you actually get a scene with Django and Boba fishing on Camino, and it's interrupted by Tanwi, who wants him to come do she wants to get more of his material so they can make more clones because he's there. And he's kind of like, oh, can't you just do it without me? Don't you have enough of it on, like, in a vat somewhere? And she's like, yeah, but it's better that you're here. It's like you're the real thing,
Like
so
example.
come on, please.
Mm.
So it makes a point that he doesn't stick around very much, so they can barely get him to cooperate. But yeah, it's a much stronger plot setup in the book because you see, what is Dooku talking about? What's he threatening? What are people concerned about? Why no army? Like, just those things are much better. But yeah, I mean, the clones in this, or I mean, the technology, like the fact that Card had like a
Sparty, I
different
think it's
idea.
called.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sparty cylinders.
yeah, he had a different understanding of what parameters the growth acceleration could be used. I mean, all those thoughts are
The
very
fear that
like,
kicks in, yeah, when they find out about the
yeah,
acceleration. That's not possible. What? That's like the one thing that
yeah,
helped us back in the day.
yeah,
That couldn't be done.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Well,
it's interesting how that thought is there with that with such a sparse understanding of what the Clone Wars ended up being, and I really am not sure whether Lucas took that idea from this,
yeah.
but
Well,
I mean, it's really strong. It's a really strong setup for, again. I don't really feel like clones are the point of this trilogy, but if you had wanted
Mm.
to make them, so if you had wanted to make this like a Clone Wars 2.0 kind of a thing,
mhm.
which I think was probably a temptation of Zounds, because a lot of his instincts were things like that. We talked about that a bit when we talked about him trying to make the Nogri as sort of like the original Sith in his mind, because he didn't know what a Sith
Mm.
was, and he was trying to make, yeah, Vader took his armor design from their physiology because they're
Mm.
the original Sith, and they put the kibosh on that and said no, but it's
Mm.
still like a classic idea.
Yeah,
So I
you can
think it's the
tell
same
what's
kind of
there.
thing here. He just he
I
he,
mean,
he puts his mind into all of these things. It's not lazy. Whatever this
no,
is
no,
like
he's
he's
trying to
giving all
make
of
things
his
cyclical.
effort
You know,
to
he's
it.
trying to call back on.
Yeah,
Well, all he knew of the Old Republic was that you fought in the Clone Wars. Like that was basically it.
yeah,
That was
That's
all
me.
we
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
So the
yep,
fact that it
yep.
was trying to draw on this, the Jedi were guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic.
Hmm.
For the Dark Times and the Clone Wars. That's basically all we had for world building up to this point. So he was
Hmm.
trying to kind of
Right.
use as much material as he could to generate some kind of idea of the cyclical theming that would later go
Mm.
on to be such a staple of the franchise. And it feels a little bit weird and slightly disconnected because of what the end Clone Wars ended up being, in retrospect. But he didn't know
Hmm.
that, and given the fact that he
Mhm.
did get it so wrong because he couldn't know, I think that it's remarkable how much, as we said with the previous books, how much of it holds up. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel incompatible with the larger world at all, even with
Mhm.
those incongruences. So yeah,
Yep.
I do
props to him for
also
that.
like how they tied. Yeah, I do also like how they tied their explanation for like the clone madness sort of thing. That actually, I got that
Mm,
sequence like right here. I just would like to read a little from it to kind of set the
Hmm.
stage. When Leia's talking to Bel Iblis, it's the Force, she told him. It was so obvious, so utterly obvious, and yet she'd missed it completely. Don't you see? When you make an exact duplicate of a sentient being, there's a natural resonance or something set up through the Force between that duplicate and the original. That's what warps the mind of a clone that's been grown too fast. There's not enough time for the mind to adapt to the pressure on it. It can't adjust, so it breaks. Um,
mm. It's mostly
again,
just techno babble, but it works.
It works for
I
what
was
we yeah, yeah. And I mean,
like
it's a nice thought because it's a thing that makes it like a Star Wars
trying to
specific
set up that
universe
mysticism
thing.
element
Mm,
with the
Yeah,
science. Yeah.
because it's also growth acceleration is also something that is touched upon in what I was just mentioning, the Attack of the Clones novel. In the version of the scene where Obi-Wan's going around with the Kaminoans, taking a look at everything,
mm,
um, he's seeing like the ones that are like Boba's age, and or maybe even a little bit younger, because he's seeing a few different generations at different ages, right?
mm,
And he's thinking that like one of them kind of bumps into him, or and then goes off to do whatever he's supposed to do, like with military efficiency or something. And he's thinking, even though he's a Jedi, right? Like raised at the temple, he's thinking this kid's been kind of cheated of whatever it is to be a kid. And it's almost like
mm,
even a Jedi raised in the temple, in that sort of cloistered, weird, no emotion, no attachments fashion, thinks this is unnatural. Like we shouldn't be doing, or this shouldn't happen, kind of a thing. And so that's just with a quote unquote normal being. So then when you add the Force into it, you're gonna get some pretty weird stuff.
It's
mm,
a
Hence Sabayoth. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, like,
Yeah.
it's a good way of like sort of like teeing up like Sabayoth's madness and why you see that degradation over the course of the trilogy, that in and of itself. And obviously, like cloning Force users is something like that the lore famously tends to really go up and down on
yeah.
Sure.
at certain points. Which yeah, I mean that's whatever. I'm not gonna hold that against the book whatsoever. And and like you could always rationalize it like, oh, cloning technology because of the Clone Wars ended up really
More
skyrocketing in
advanced.
efficiency,
Yeah,
which
sure.
Mm,
honestly, which I mean, that always made sense to me. Like, I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
go nuts on that one, but again, tying it to that mystical element is very interesting, and of course, using it provides another reason for the Yislamari to be where they're at because
mm.
them offering that bubble helps the stability of the growth process.
I thought that
Also,
was a nice
minor
touch,
thing.
actually. I know it's a simple, not really story significant thing, but I thought it was a cool plot touch, having that be, oh, that's why he had so many, that's why they weren't present on the ships, that's
Yes,
why.
I was literally about to
Oh,
say,
sorry.
yeah.
It's a
No, no,
cool
it's
idea,
fine.
though,
You're
isn't it?
absolutely yeah, yeah, it's great. And also another minor thing I like in the writing, they point out the fact that Thrawn is very specifically cloning his best soldiers,
Mm,
like, in mass, like, the ones who are the most skilled at, like, numerous tasks. Again, you would figure that would be the case, but I do like the fact that they very specifically point that out. That
yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
And I like the
The one who
response
gets the
from, I think it was
promotion.
Imbliss as well.
He's thinking,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, you're due for a club.
You'll
Like,
do,
I'm
yeah,
not gonna
you'll be
tell
on the
you that's one of
list.
the.
You put
Please
his name
report
on
to
the
room
list.
5B for
Yeah,
a specified appointment.
deposit your sample.
Yeah.
No, I like the idea that the fact that the person who was with them when they read that would make sense. I like the fact that it was, of course, they're doing that. I like the in-world like demonstration of how obvious that is. Even though he's taking the time to hang a lantern on it narratively, I think that was a really cool, clever decision. Where do we want to kind of tilt the camera to next? Where do we want to focus next with the story? I know we're kind of going all over the place here. What's the kind of next big beat we want to discuss?
Characters.
Basically, just highlights, whatever you guys want to talk about. I think at this point, because like we talked about for me, my disappointments or things we already talked about broad scale. Most characters that I like don't get enough to do, or they're a little bit far flung from wherever the action is. So that's pretty much it. That's the ongoing complaint. So otherwise, we can just talk about whatever you guys want.
It's definitely true for me as well. That's the main complaint that's kind of consistent throughout. There's not enough for people to do of significance that's tied to the larger narrative and the kind of scope effects. We've beaten that drum enough now. But having said that, within the not enough that they have to do, I still like all of the characters. The tertiary and the secondary. Card is great. Everything with the smugglers I've really enjoyed. Just didn't really have time for in this particular book. It was too much time spent on it. As good as it was. I like Gamba Liblis and the political stuff. Like I said with the Mon Mothma scene, I really like the idea there. It just needed more story relevance, more significance, better placement, because the exact scene was, like Evan said, a bit, why are we talking about this now? We haven't got time for this kind of thing. I wanted Akbar to be relevant because we'd had so much talked about him with the second
Also,
and first book.
the second book is like it's kind of like a
weirdly
cliffhanger.
stretching.
Like what are we gonna do
Exactly.
about
Like the whole
this
point.
problem?
Yeah, let's get Akbar cleared, and then it's like, well, he's not even in the book. He's out. He's over there briefly, and he's there to say it's a trap at the end. But that's basically it. Like I said before, story wise, he should have been a big victory for the protagonist. Them getting him cleared and them getting in the position he needed to be in was a foil against Thrawn. It was a victory. It was the board set for them in their favor. That was all the stuff that we talked about before. But also just generally having his presence. We talked about Wedge Antilles. These are people you don't need in the story to serve any significant purpose, but we like their presence. They have that Star Wars tone. They have that relevance. I mean, things with the Rogue Squadron books surrounding this trilogy and this era. They were big favorites from people. I'd like to see. I like everything we see for these characters. I'd like to see more.
Yeah, I mean, everything is competently written. It's just the way in which it's presented that's kind of the major hurdle.
This isn't really fair to do what I'm saying, because I'm taking into account sources that came in publication terms well after this. But like in a perfect world, would you have liked to see some kind of combination between like, for example, Failure, like what his death scene ends up being? Would you have liked that to, instead of it being with the Vong invasion, would you have liked it to be, okay, he schemes Akbar out of command, and then like he's got command at like the worst possible time, and he then has to kind of like earn a bit
him
of,
stepping into the position of Draven, for example, would have been put prime. Him needing to be replaced. That would explain why it was not Akbar there to be replaced by Iblis. Things like that. Just tying those threads together, so that I understand why this was now such a big focus in book 2 now, because we wanted this scene, we wanted this power balance, we wanted this victory for Thrawn, this victory against Thrawn, all of that stuff. Everything that happens in this book, it feels like book 2 and 1 and 2 didn't need to happen, really. You could have started here, and most of it would carry out the same way. Which is, that's fine if it's a book if it's a book in a long series, but it's the close of a trilogy. You need that connective tissue. It's the same thing we talked about with the original trilogy. There isn't that much connecting those three in the grand scheme, particularly with the 2-half split of Return of the Jedi. Just it needed more.
That's the real divorce point.
It just needed more tying it all together, really. But the characters are all fun. I like the ancillary characters. I like all of the characters that don't really have much story presence. Their voice is very distinct. Everyone has their own clear kind of perspectives, and the dialogue, their choices they've got. The ruffled feathers and the friction and the personal grievances. You see little flares of bits, but hidden beneath a veneer of professionalism and the context of just the military setup and everything. He understands this is a real world that he's trying to breathe life into, and he does that very well. And I like to see that in all of the background characters. They all just carry that through very nicely.
Yeah, like I liked his death in Star by Star during the fall of Coruscant, like that sequence. But if I'm being honest, like his agency would have definitely been improved if like you were saying, if he had like kind of taken up that mantle and had to kind of some quasi redemption. Like literally like his idea of redemption in this book is like, okay, I'm just gonna stop speaking.
Yeah,
like
Right.
and then also start speaking
Exactly.
again, but nothing I'm saying has
Yeah.
any like oomph to it. Like, I
Yeah.
thought, oh, is he going to make
'Cause
like a
right.
really non-failure point that everyone think that's actually a good point? We didn't think about that. Bit of redemption for you,
Yeah.
a bit of redemption
'cause I
spice.
really like
Because he just says random stuff that has nothing to do with anything. Like, why are you breaking your silence for this? It's so
yeah,
weird.
Mhm.
I like the slice of redemption that he gets, as it is. It's just I feel like it could be connected to a story because he's part of the trouble here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like he's part of the reason why the situation is what it is, and we're in like this kind of not battle ready state, at a certain
Mm.
point.
Could have used some recognition on his part. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
even
feel like
Leia's
it could really
forgiveness of
Actual
just
him. It's like,
remorse.
okay, great, Leia, good that you're doing like an internal Jedi thing. I always approve of that. But where's the
yeah,
story significance? Where is the timing? Where is the relevance to this?
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Do we want to kind of
when it
touch on
when
the
it
climax at this
I
point
was gonna
because that's
Yeah,
another
yeah.
I
high
was
point
gonna
for us?
I was gonna say because like we've talked about the fact that this is really more like a Mara Jade book. I mean, even the title, like I
Mm.
mean, that kind of speaks to it. Really, the last
Mm.
command. We keep going back
Right.
to
You
you will
won't
kill Luke
kill Luke
Skywalker. Yeah,
Skywalker.
It
You
really
won't kill Luke Skywalker. The whole
actually,
series just
I will
yeah,
echoing that.
yeah,
I will say it is often kind of cringy when certain works will like try and work in the title of like the book or movie or whatever into the actual dialogue. But like I actually think here the way it was set up was pretty well done. Like because
I agree.
that can often come off like I said that can often come off as like really cringy. But like the whole like after she kills like the Luke clone, she's like she had fulfilled the Emperor's last command. Boom, chapter ends. It's like okay, that was good. I liked that. So
Uh,
I'll give her credit for that.
I agree. Not only with that, but I would have liked to see it closer tied. I would like to see Thrawn give the retreat command. The last thing he does before he dies is like retreat, saves his people. Have it.
Oh
I
yeah.
know he doesn't actually care about his people. There's an allusion to that, but he will just burn lives for the sake of victory. I mean, just the way he discards the general when he sends Sabath off. But I would have liked that not to be the case, and for him to like give that last command of be the person who signals that they have won, sound the retreat, Pelion, before he dies. They're kind of an opposite of Nelson type of
Yeah.
situation. That having those two last commands from each side would have been really cool tied to the
That would have been
trilogy
nice.
for me.
I was never a big fan of like Pelion just gives up like that. That always rubbed me the wrong way.
Well,
Like I get like when
we
he's
don't see
like,
the battle
"Oh, I'm
at
not
all.
Thrawn. I can't." Huh?
We don't see the
What'd you
battle
say?
at all, so it's like we don't even know why he's giving
No.
up. He just goes, "Oh, it got a bit difficult when it wasn't before. Let's go." It's like,
Like
okay.
I get that he's grieving because Thrawn just died and he literally just had his throat slashed so by the Nogri. So I get that he's not in the best headspace, but it's like again, like why did he give up? Like he
It,
literally just said like, "Oh, Thrawn could salvage this, but I'm not Thrawn." It's like, but you're not.
I
Yeah,
think
I
You're
like that
incapable too.
acknowledgement, but it also flies in the theming of the book because this was why they lost when the
Yes.
Emperor died. Like the whole point is that
Yes.
Thrawn's not building that same empire. When Thrawn dies, it should be more self-sustaining and capable of looking after itself. But
Mhm.
if we saw that within that resolution, it would have been much nicer, I think.
Right.
More
Him
powerful.
coming to that realization of him not being on Thrawn's level is fine if he had actually taken the reins of the ship, commanded the battle, and was actually losing.
Yeah.
That would have been fantastic. But it like again, like the way like you were saying, Colin, the way it's presented is like Thrawn dies, he gets hurt, he looks at a view screen, the battle starts, and he's just like, okay, I'm done, and like that's it.
I mean, they have
Can
every advantage. They've just
Yeah.
caught the rebellion. Sorry, I'm just getting into Imperial terms. The Republic unawares. They've just interdicted them out of hyperspace to the perfect position. They're in ambush position. The only negative downside is that some of their support stations are being attacked surprisedly by Rogue Squadron and the unknown element. They don't recognize it being Card. For all they care, abandon the stations. They've got many more elsewhere. Lose the whole system. Beat the fleets. There's no reason they can't beat the fleets here, based on what's been presented. They don't need the flair of Thrawn to win this situation, as from what we've seen.
Yeah,
But we
it's
don't get
just
any of that.
it's
He just like, oh, Thrawn's dead, run away. If it had
yeah.
been Thrawn's
I
call, that fixes that.
Oh yes. Yeah, no, I get the intention. It does not land nearly as strongly as I think Zahn probably intended it to because of the setup and the structure. So that's
Mm.
kind of it. But down on Wayland, we obviously have the confrontation between Luke and Mara and Sabayoth. What did you guys think of that overall? I like the fight scene in and of itself with what's the clone called? La'uk with two U's. Luke
Luke, yeah.
Skywalker.
Jarus.
I can't
Um,
with that. Yeah, I just call him the Luke clone. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I can't do the
Well, it's
stupid
because
naming convention.
yeah, because like Joris and Joruis, because
Yeah,
they were
I've
trying
always
to
thought that
follow
was
that.
silly,
Which
but I
um,
do like the I don't I don't know if I like this concept really at all, but I like the way that it's written. If I'm making sense with that, I mean
Yeah, same.
the the I was complaining earlier about how characters are constantly remembering back to something that happened in one of the movies we watched. And for me, that just felt a little late. Playing the greatest hits, or just we don't need that. We know that. Like I mean, it wasn't even that long ago. But I
Mm.
mean, uh, I do like the tee up to like the weird like deja vu of like the Dagobah cave that Luke was talking about, like having, and then this time it's like an actual physical representation. It
That was a
isn't
good one.
like the vision.
Yeah, that
It's
was
it's a,
good.
it's a it's a nice, again, I don't really like this concept. I don't know that I would have written this scene, but if you're gonna write the scene, this is the way to write it. I think it was really
Mm.
well done. So for
I
sure.
also
Completely agree.
yeah, I also really do like the horror in like Luke's like when he realizes what he's actually looking at. Like imagine
Mhm.
seeing your own face stare back at you, but instead of a mirror, it's a fucking
Yeah.
clone of you.
Yeah.
The
Angry
unsettling
as
nature
well.
of that is yeah, the unsettling nature of that is really interesting. And I do also like the fact that again, Luke doesn't have a ton of agency in this book, but I do like the fact that he's able to sort of deduce what Sabayoth's crazy intentions are fairly quickly. It's like, okay, either I strike down this clone in anger and fall to the dark side, or the clone kills me and now he has his own Luke, to serve him ready to go. So it's kind of like a lose-lose sort of situation. Again, I like the fact that he's spent enough time around Sabayoth up until this point to realize his crazy thought process. So I like the fact that he doesn't have to work too hard to kind of understand what's going on, even though it is a very unsettling situation. That's a good callback to what happened in Dark Force when he served under him and was slowly kind of realizing, oh wait, this guy's insane. I do like
Mhm.
that. So that's again, the sequence is weird, but I will give credit where it's due. That was interesting to me.
It's the smallest piece of it, but I also like to give a nod to the idea of the kind of the resonance, like noise that's just disrupting Luke. Like the fact that because he's facing his clone,
Oh
there's
yeah,
that
the
force,
clone
just
madness sort of.
in
Yep.
synchronicity. Yeah, that feedback loop. I like that as an excuse for why he's struggling as much as he is as well. That it's not important. You don't need that, but if you want to kind of justify why he isn't at the scale we've seen him both
Hmm.
in Return of the Jedi and beyond, why he's struggling against his clone with less experience, less time, etc. All those stuff you want to play with. Nice idea to get around that. It was a cute little
Who's the
concept
who's
to finish
the
this up.
who was who was the Imperial character that got like mind fucked by
Oh,
Covell, General
Cybial?
Covell. I can't remember
Yeah,
his
that
name.
was a well done
I
sequence
was
too.
gonna say I
But
really
yeah,
like that
yeah,
as well. The
yeah.
actual
The
writing of that,
POV for
the
him being
horror.
in Sabayoth's
Yeah,
mind. Yeah.
it came a little out of left field that we didn't see hints of this. Like I would like to see the background radiation kind of dread in the story, so that the reader knew, okay, if he's left alone too long, this kind of thing will. We can see that he's up to something. If we saw that Sabath was up to something and not just a raving lunatic that Thrawn could just discard whenever he wants, it would have been more powerful for me. But in isolation, that was a very powerful scene. Just seeing that kind of that
yeah.
emptiness, that fear of the emptiness and that dread and the confusion and the horror and the almost
Mhm.
kind of
Not wanting to be separated.
yeah, and the almost nurturing corrupt version of that, obviously, but the nurturing element on Sabath's side, as when he's looking down, like trying, no, don't worry, I'm here still, I'm here, I've just been separated, that kind of thing. That's a really creepy
Mhm.
and cool way, take to have the evil Jedi Master kind of take that route. I would like to see
Yeah.
Because
that
it shows you
more.
like this is what he wants to do with everybody. So
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was really cool. And if it had been done if we'd had that character be more of a character as well, because he
Mhm.
wasn't really in the story, that would have been more powerful if it was
Yeah, I
someone
agree with
like
you. Yeah.
on the level of
Mhm.
an Imperial version of Card, for example. But maybe just that level
Mhm.
of significance. I wouldn't choose it to be Pelion, but for example, it could have been Pelion. That would have been a
Sure.
really strong, dramatic
Mhm.
choice. Yeah, and it also would make sense for why Thrawn sent him there instead, because it's it's someone
Right.
with significant authority and someone he trusts enough. Just
Mhm.
it could have been more. But for what it was
Yeah,
a very well
definitely.
written scene.
Mhm. Oh, and,
Really creepy.
speaking of which, I do like Peliad's POV when he tries to, tell Thrawn what Sabayoth's doing, but he can't remember it because of like
Hmm.
the Force influence from before. I do like his POV where he's trying to remember. It's like, wait, I meant to say something about Sabayoth. Like what? Like that was a well done POV. So I will give it credit for that too. Pelion doesn't have a lot of good POVs in this book, but that's definitely a notable one.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
What
Just
do we
because
But
you
think
yeah,
about
remembered. Sorry, this is
you go?
really out of position now, but just because you were talking about the early part of the book there, and that I wasn't focusing on from the rest of this. One of the critiques I had right when we started reading this for the review, and I think I messaged you guys at the time. I was completely blown away by the like the sheer drop in quality of the writing itself for the early portion of this book, when we're getting the opening scenes for each different set of characters, and that the amount of work spent on saying, hey, okay, if you haven't read the first and second book, I'm going to catch you up on what happened. Like, remember when this happened, and how this happened, and because this happened, this was happening. All the dialogue was so unnatural for the opening chapters.
I was
I was like,
wondering whether
oh,
that
God, this is
wasn't some
horrific.
kind of like, I was wondering whether that wasn't like some kind of publisher note, just
editor's
stamping on the
note,
whole thing.
exactly.
It was
Like,
very
oh,
odd.
because
It
they
was
don't.
so
I don't
disjointed
know.
compared to the rest of it, and it picked up the
Do the
quality like
books?
straight after that as well. It was like straight back to what we'd
Yeah.
expect from him as a writer.
Do the
Yeah.
books say book 1, book 2, book 3, or
I
are they
think so,
just
yeah.
the subtitles?
Yeah, they do.
They do? Okay,
I
right.
think
Because
so.
it's like it just feels very. I don't know. Like it does feel. It kind of reminds me of like really like I know that it's Star Wars and you could argue these are kids books, but they don't really feel. You know what I mean? They feel like they're not they're not like being written for like a 5-year-old. You know what I
No.
mean? But like
Mm.
something like Harry Potter does. We're in year 4 now. Here's what happened in years 1, 2, and 3. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They do that for kids, but this one I did feel a bit like we know this.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
it's the way it's
especially
being
for a
delivered as well.
book,
It's so inelegant compared to everything
especially
else.
because like Empire, Dark Force Rising ends on a cliffhanger. So you definitely, if you're picking this up, you're like, oh yeah, I remember what happened last time. Show me where we're going now. Like, but
Yeah.
yeah,
You would think,
it
yeah.
was a bit weird. I know.
Yeah, it was really weird,
But
but
kind
and
of that.
recovers very rapidly. Like it moves past that. But for those opening
Yeah,
chapters of each character, I'm like,
yeah.
oh God, this is really
I'd
bad.
forgotten that.
And I was like,
Yeah,
is
I
this
don't know.
why?
I don't know if
I
it
was thinking, is
recovers
this why we didn't like
quickly,
this one
but
much? Is it this big a drop? I was very happy when it climbed back up to the previous writing quality as well, because I thought, oh God, if this is why we didn't like this one as much, this is going to be a horrible read. But yeah,
I don't know if I'd say it recovers quickly, but yeah, it does recover.
quickly enough,
So
yeah. But yeah,
yeah,
it was. I
quickly
was
enough.
glad of that.
Yeah.
And sorry to mention that now. That should have been an earlier in the
No, it's
conversation
cool.
thing, but
No, it's
I'd
fine.
forgotten until you mentioned that part of the book.
Yeah. But yeah, the actual like anything anyone wants to say about the actual fight
Oh,
sequence. I mean,
I was gonna ask what we thought of like Mara, like just as like a thematic through line, you know, like for her character. Like what do we think of all this? Because a lot of it
very
is yeah.
yeah. I think it was very strong. I honestly like
Yeah.
the first of all, I like the training sequence between her and Luke, but on Wayland beforehand, her like kind of
Hmm.
more willingness to open up to him, despite quite literally having the Emperor in the back of her head still screaming to kill her. I really did feel like her arc, again, not just in this book, but just in the trilogy overall, was probably the strongest, if I'm being honest. Like, if you're going for just this book trilogy for full consistency, I would argue she's probably the best. Like, she suffers the least over the course of the 3 books. And her ultimate sort of resolution and doing the right thing despite, her upbringing and kind of taking that agency for herself that had been taken away from her for so long. I really did enjoy that. And again, just even if you take away the whole, her ultimately being the one to kill the Luke clone and that breaking the spell that Palpatine, put under her, I do like the fact that the book highlights her agency and the fact that no, I'm doing this because it's right. I'm doing this because I want to do it, not because the Emperor, not because of Card, not because of Sabayoth, because of me. And I think that was really strong.
That was the ingredient I liked the most as well. The fact that she was, even when she was given the opportunity to kill Luke, and she was actually thinking, "Yeah, I'll do it. Not right now, and not because you told me to. It'll happen when it needs to
Mhm.
happen." Kind of thing. I need him for now.
Yeah.
That level of control helped get around the otherwise kind of crassness of it being the cheat code of, "Oh, she killed Luke, but it wasn't the right one." That could have been really, that could have fallen really flat. But because she had all that agency and the decision making leading up to it, I think you got around that quite nicely.
This
I
is
also
kind of like
I liked her thought process when she discovers that Vader and Luke were obviously father and son, like the shock of that and how it like doesn't really line up with her dreams and her like coming to terms with that and that kind of being the one of the final crescendos for her finally rejecting the dark side. Again, I thought that was really nice too because although it seems a little I don't want to say obvious. Like, it doesn't. I don't want. I'm not trying to say that that's like an obvious thing to do from a writing perspective, but I do think the way it was set up and the effect it had on her was very natural. Do you see what I'm kind of getting with that? I don't know.
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, for me, her relationship with Palpatine just I just wish it had been more developed than what it is. And so I I feel like this is a good sequence of scenes that all work for me as overcoming all of that. I think I wish her backstory had been a little bit more. well, in my opinion anyway, more interesting. But I think I also would have liked it tied to Thrawn specifically because he's here. Like the Emperor
Mm,
and Vader are gone, and it's very it's not a deep mystery really, like what the Emperor is using her for. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh,
All right.
you
destroy
will kill Luke
Skywalker.
Skywalker. It's
Yeah,
just
Yeah.
constant.
and why? Because the Skywalkers are fucking me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like from beyond the grave. It's just trying to just a little stab at vengeance. I think it would have been
Which
because of
is
what I think I would have redone her intro into the story because of what Thrawn is, like this force that was out on the outskirts. I think I would have had the Emperor post Mara as his Vader, like his executor, like kind
Mm,
of like she goes out and does the
seconded.
things that, like, you know what I mean, and so it's when she turns against not just her past, she's actively turning against Thrawn, who's like the living now embodiment of the Empire now. Like
Agreed.
rather than it be because Sabath really has nothing to do with her. You know what I mean? And Vader and the Emperor are dead.
I
his
You know.
predilections to
think.
the contrary notwithstanding, I
Yeah.
have seen your destiny, Mara.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
I'm pretty sure he
things.
says that line like 4 times in
Yeah,
like
I
3
liked how she
pages.
was kneeling when she delivered the final blows. It was amusing to kind of show that. Um,
Oh yeah, the
the
symmetry.
but talking about the Marauder, like again, I completely agree. I mean, I like the character and particularly what comes
Me
later in the
too.
EU as well.
Yes.
But
Especially in
she's
this book, I like her in this.
yes,
Mhm.
I like her. I like her starting here. Yeah, she's better, even
yeah,
better,
yeah,
like as she goes on.
of
But
course,
Yeah.
and
in
she's
this
good
trilogy,
before this as
she's
well. But
stronger
this
here
is
than
where
she
she's
has
strongest.
been.
This trilogy
Yeah,
by far, strongest part of the trilogy
yeah,
for her. But to
yeah.
Mhm.
me, it's again, it's the concept over the execution. We've talked about it enough times now, but if this, for example, had been 5 books, you could have had her
Mhm.
be Thrawn's Vader, like you said, which I think is a fantastic idea, up to end of book 2, start of book 3, even all the way up to the finale here. The card interaction when he's taken aboard the capital ship, instead of having Luke and Mara go aboard to rescue him, she's there and he's partially turned away from the dark by him for whatever reason you want to come up with. There could have been a number of things there. Take it into his confidence, kind of like in her mind, a bridging step away from the Empire. She becomes the Vader to his organization instead, taking on her own agency, taking on the neutral perspective. No, I'm not going to be a thrall to the Empire because of what I've just seen Thrawn do, perhaps. Maybe it's something to do with the Nogri enslavement. I'm not agreeing with that or whatever. I'm not going to be a slave like the Nogri. I see what he's doing to me. Concepts like that could have been played with. Then having him bridging into this situation where she's becoming second to card in the smuggler's ring, putting her in the end of this trilogy here with the confrontation against Sabayoth. She sees what the danger of the clones will be. She sees the danger of what Thrawn will do with the clones. She's there for the same reason she is in this book, except instead of
Yeah.
it being the conclusion of a journey where she's already been detached from the Empire, this is the first point where she's stepping away and completely cutting ties, proving herself
Yeah.
against them, not just neutral, alongside them. Sabayoth is dealt with. Then book 4 and 5 ends up being okay. Now we deal with Thrawn, who she's now
Yeah, that
actively
would be really
working with
cool.
the
Yeah.
New Republic against. I think that could have
Yeah.
been a much stronger. Again, this is all with
Yeah.
hindsight, and it's easier to say this after the
It,
fact. But
it is
I
easier.
think this is
It's
a
not.
this is
Yeah.
a
It's kind of like trying to fix the prequels. It's much easier when
yeah
you're
Right.
looking at the full thing. Like, you know
yeah
what I mean?
exactly.
Then it's because
Yeah.
that's I used to be, and I still do make fun of Lucas. But when I think about what he was trying to do now, and like the clear light of day, it's a much more advanced, full of heart kind of story. It like
Mm,
it's something he was passionate about in
yeah.
comparison to the types of
Yeah.
stories they've been making,
Right.
in more recent years. So it's
And to
like
be fair, even
I
back in the day
I
when we
get it.
criticized them
Yeah.
most harshly, we always said the ideas were there. The ideas were
The
strong,
ideas
the
were
Right.
world
there.
was
Yeah.
there, the
Yeah.
premise was
That was
good
consistent from the
idea.
get-go. It
Yeah,
was
it was
all
only ever
execution.
execution we complained about. But I
Yeah.
think it's true of this here, even without the massive flaws and issues that
Yeah.
the prequels have.
Mhm.
Just this could have been so much more. I think Mara and
Because I feel like
Thrawn and
Mara,
all of them would have been better for it.
Right.
Just having those
if
extra
you
two
tied
And
books
I
those
of padding.
characters together a little bit, like just more, I just feel like a lot of this would feel much more like relevant, to its own
Mm.
story. You know what I mean? It would just feel much more coherent, or like it's coalescing around something. I don't know. It's like it would just
Even
feel like
just
it
the cyclical nature.
more
Thrawn's
natural. You know what I
Vader.
mean?
Yeah, Thrawn's
Yeah,
Vader
yeah,
is a concept. Of course, that's going to be a brilliant idea. And then the fact,
Mhm.
that her learning the truth about the Nogri could have been a big knock against her trust in Thrawn. If Thrawn, like you said before, Thrawn should be the one who actively was the reason for that enslavement. That could have
make
been
him
one
the
of his
puppet
ideas.
master. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
make
yeah.
it
He's
because
kind
more
of
what he
built
is,
up
he's
the
like
team.
the ultimate tactician. He's like the ultimate chess master. He's not
Mm,
quite a puppet master. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, and I feel like the story kind of wants to have one, in Sabayoth, ain't it? Like Sabayoth wants to be that,
Yeah.
It really
but
isn't.
it's funny because like early on in the story, like when Luke first meets him after like one meeting, he's like talking with like R2, or like, yeah, I think he's insane, R2. It's just it's like, okay, well,
I remember you saying in book
so
2, yeah, in book 2 reviews, said the
yeah, the
same thing.
kind of
And I get it. I mean,
yeah,
it is Luke, so it's like he is often like blindly optimistic. So I get that, but it does come off a
sure.
little silly when you're like, I
It's
think like,
because
when you start zapping people with lightning, Luke, you probably should have taken a step back. I'm just saying.
there's also the fact that this narrator is so good at doing like Mark Hamill that
Yes.
and the tone of that
Yeah.
scene, it feels a lot like what's going on Dagobah, where he's just talking
Mm.
with R2 in the swamps. Like, yeah, I think he's insane. Just so and that undercuts your where is this going? Like where's
Yeah.
this like the relation? It's like, well, you kind of know where that's going, so that's not too interesting. You're just
Yeah.
kind of waiting for how we're going to subvert this or get around this villain.
Mhm.
He's a villain, I guess. He's an antagonist, whatever.
Yeah,
I mean,
antagonist for sure.
Kind of a force of
it
nature, really. He's just kind
yeah.
of
Mm.
uncontrollable cyclone of power that like pretty much no one could rein in, and that's not a bad thing in and of itself. You just kind of
And
have
like
to make it kind of interesting.
I
Mm.
love the line like when he says I'll deal with Mara Jade later. It's like you'll deal with me now, but it's like well that would be
Yes.
much better if it's a character that she actually had some kind of friction with,
Yeah,
like
that
real
could have been
friction,
Thrawn, for example, in the context of
like
what
a
we're talking about how
lifelong
if she
Yeah.
Thrawn's
relationship of some
Vader,
kind.
yeah.
Yeah,
Not that I'm
exactly.
advocating for that within this story, obviously, but in this idea that we've got in our heads, the more relevant
Yeah,
connection. Like you say, there's no personal meat between her and Sabaoth, and if there
yeah,
was going to be, it needed to be tied thematically to the rest of the story. Like she has a
Mhm.
personal
yeah.
like, aggravation against what he's done to the Nogri, or
And
clones. Just that you shouldn't be
yeah,
cloning because maybe I'm a clone. I hate that. Or I had a clone that I saw.
whatever.
Some
Yeah.
kind of whatever you want it to
Yeah.
be. Something to tie. That's a really bad example, obviously, but just something to tie it so that she has a personal resentment against him beyond just that I'm
There's also
nebulously worried about a second Clone Wars happening because I know my
yeah.
history. I mean, she even says,
You
"I
guys,
know my history. I don't want another Clone Wars." That's her only stake in being involved in this finale.
yeah.
Which we don't even get full context for that anyway, so it's like it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to really take that, seriously.
But you guys had mentioned earlier that the sort of uh plot weakness, scene weakness of like the Pelion being wrapped up, like his
Mm.
perspective and all that. Every character, I feel like I think the story it just doesn't feel like the end of a trilogy.
Yeah.
It should have a much stronger epilogue, just from every character's perspective. Like every character, I like the last scene. Where I was going was I like this scene between her and Luke and the lightsaber
Mm.
handoff, and you're going to be a Jedi, and I want you to have this kind of a thing, and how he like corrects the thought because I want you to have it. Like I mean, it's a really strong scene, but how about that's one scene among many other scenes to close this
Right.
out? You know what I mean?
Mm.
it feels like
Meet the
it
twins
could
for
be a
one.
much stronger.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. That
yeah,
would have worked
exactly.
so well, like having multiple
Yeah.
epilogues, like with the actual family dynamic. Like, yes, you'll be a Jedi one day, and then have that tie into him finally meeting the twins. That would have been perfect,
The
You know,
lightsaber
three
handoff
twins.
should be the equivalent of him with the Jedi spirits while the Ewok party's going on with
Yeah.
that being the twins.
Or
Yeah,
Like
receiving
kind of
the
you know
hand
what
at
I
the
mean?
end of Empire Strikes Back. And then they walk off and they join the rest of the
Yeah,
family and they have the look across the Coruscant sunset, the planet they
yeah,
saved. The galaxy. It just it needed that kind of
yeah,
connection.
Mhm.
Particularly, again, we didn't notice at the time. So this is hindsight, but particularly because we know that she's going to go on to be Mara, the aunt to these twins.
Yes.
This is all relevant in the long term. And even though he didn't know that was going to be the case, he knew that Mara was going to be a significant character. So putting her in that lineup the same way they did maybe with Lando and
Mhm.
in the Empire Strikes Back situation, just something to
Mhm.
tie it all together. More resonance
Yeah,
than
and
just the Mara connection.
I would
yeah,
say like
and
this is a book I liked more going. Are we moving into kind of wrapping up, or
Yeah,
is
yeah,
there
for sure.
another?
yeah,
Okay,
in case
okay.
I mean, I don't think there's much to say about like Sabayoth's death. I mean, he gets
No.
stabbed
No.
and he explodes.
I think,
Um,
and like I said before, it's just not the Emperor. We've seen this.
yeah,
If you're going to do this, he played it out really well, and I really like the writing, and I really like the connection. I like all the ideas here, very strong. But we didn't need this scene. This is Return of the Jedi all over again. I mean, apart from anything else, just the contrast with the fleet up in space. It's a trap. It's
yeah,
all happening.
little on
It's
the
the
nose.
same beat sheet.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a book I enjoyed more than I thought I would because I remember being kind of down on it, and I love the audio production. It's really
mm,
really fantastic, so that
Mhm.
helps. But it's just it's a book, and I kind of knowing what to expect that takes a little of the sting out the second time. So it's not a
yeah.
terrible book, but it
No,
is
not
still
by
my least favorite of the three for sure. That's not changed and probably never will. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to talk about because I didn't realize going through it how much it kind of reminded me of like what my issues are with even the films I consider good. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm,
it's the weakest entry in a good series. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that's kind of how I view it. You know?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same wavelength. I mean, this book in and of itself is very good, but it is the weakest of the trilogy, not because there's anything overtly terrible about it. It's just, again, like we've said a lot of times, structure, pacing, character usage just isn't quite as strong as it has been, and because of that, it does kind of stand out, along with a few plot issues that, like we said, we all think could have been executed better.
Mm.
Again, does not make it a bad experience in and of itself. It's just like and when it does land, like I said, there are sequences in this that are really good, very powerhouse, and it'll definitely leave you, feeling something deep. But at the same time, taken as just a whole aggregate, it just doesn't quite land where it should. But you can see where it could really shine, and I think that's what we're trying to emphasize. I mean, this is still a
Yeah.
big recommend. I mean, again, if you're a fan of the previous two books, you will definitely still get something out of
Yeah.
this. A lot of what worked
Mm.
there does work here. Again, it's just it doesn't quite hold together in quite the same way. And for me as well, it's definitely the least of the three, but still good overall.
Hmm. For sure.
And same
Alan?
again for me. I mean, you know my thoughts at this point. Should have been a 5-book series. The ideas we
Mhm.
played with the connection to Mara and Thrawn could have been stronger. Sabath could have been stronger. All of the other characters could have had greater relevance if more time had been spent on them, or that more time had been available to spend on them as much as it has been done. It kind of fizzles out is the main issue. It's a decent book, but for what has been built up to with book 1 and 2 that are so strong, and again, even just the act 2 of this book, the content here in the middle is really, really strong. I love everything that's going on. It feels very Star Wars. The world is wonderful. All of the side characters have lovely texture and great dialogue, and concepts throughout are wonderful. And particularly, again, he knew nothing about the EU. This is the guy who gave birth to the EU, pretty much. This is,
Yeah.
just the films to work with, tying everything together and
Mhm.
making it as rich as it is here. He deserves all the props in the world. Salute it all to the nth degree for all of that, but just doesn't feel like it could have been as good as it should have done. It feels like this could have been
Yeah.
a much stronger story for a bit longer, a bit more time, and had more thematic ties to everything that came
Mhm.
before it. With the first two
I would
books,
like to. I would like to say though that it's not really like just like a horrible, sort of death knell or anything because
not
the
at all. No,
EU continued long after
Right.
this. So it's like,
exactly.
I think if this been like the end of like, those characters, I think it would have been like, yeah, that kind of whatever. Like, I mean, it's
Could
a
have gone
great
better,
setup
yeah.
and
Yeah.
a great setup that didn't really go anywhere. But the fact that it's kind of just yeah, it's a little bit of a wonky ending to that piece. But at least the rest of the EU is still
Right.
there.
Yeah,
Canon or no, I always I always find it so fascinating that people get bogged down on what's canon still to this day. Who gives a crap? I mean,
Exactly.
if
It
the
doesn't
rise of
matter. It's about
Skywalker
what
is
you
canon,
enjoy.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
what I mean?
Most
It's
of it,
like,
I've
who
said before,
cares
most
about
of it, I think,
canon?
comes down to the consistency and the expectation of more content to come. Like the knowledge that
Yeah,
you will get to see more of these characters because there is attention spent on the cohesion of and creation of canon. If that's the only relevance to it, if it's not that there are two different branches, you've got to pick a favorite branch to choose from. It's the fact that we want to see where Jason and Jane are going to go from, and for that to happen and to get those stories outside of fan fiction and our own imaginations, we have to have authors and story management to kind of develop the world with care and attention. And things like KOTOR never would have got them without the concept of canon being around.
sure,
So
for sure.
just things like that. So
Yeah.
I understand the appreciation for it, but yeah, people get too strung up about it on the individual details, particularly with worlds as big as Star Wars, because it gets so
Right.
expansive. Unless you're the people like
Well, it's the
Casino,
idea that
you're never going to
it's
keep it
like
all
the
tied
idea that
together
this
perfectly.
particular canon is held up as some kind of like, litmus test for what you should or shouldn't pay attention to is ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, there is
Enjoy what you
amazing
enjoy.
stuff.
That's
Like
what it all just comes down to, you know?
yeah,
that's always been true for sure, even
Yeah.
before Disney took over. But
yeah.
it is the fact that you have something as amazing as Andor residing in the same space as Rise of Skywalker
You
or
can, and
Boba
one of the things we
Fett
like
or
about that series, of
you know what
course,
I
is you
mean?
can pick that up and put this mostly within our preferred canon of the legends. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
nice as well.
yeah.
But yeah,
Exactly. Yep.
I always jump to the fence with that one. But yeah, this we owe this writer and this trilogy so much. Everything that came past it
Absolutely. The
was
impact of this
built.
trilogy cannot be undersold.
Yeah,
I mean, it started something that, would persevere for so many decades and then, brought so many amazing stories to life and, gave so many authors the opportunity to dive into this world that we all love. So, for that alone, it really does deserve all the credit.
and for us three in
For sure.
particular, I mean, it kind of defined our childhoods, right? I know, like you said, Matt, this particular trilogy came a bit later on, but what this gave birth to within the
Yeah, the things that it
writers of the
gave birth
time.
to, sure. It's
Started
sort of like
something that
the
did become a
it's kind
staple
of
of our
like the
show.
Yeah,
grandfather of things that I really, like, loved growing up, and I'm appreciative to it for that reason, for sure. I
yeah,
always try to give things credit for
Mhm.
it, even authors like Frank Miller, who I'm not a fan of as a
yes,
person
yeah.
at
It's a
all,
good
but,
tie
I
into
mean,
that. Yeah,
his stuff, like, without his stuff, you wouldn't have many of the things that make a modern Batman
Mhm.
popular, like, or like Batman in the minds of many people.
exactly.
But, like, that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
like in a different way, in a much more charitable, in much more honest sense, I would give this, the same kind of due credit because it definitely paved the way for my childhood for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So with all that said, that has been our analysis of The Last Command and the Thrawn trilogy as a whole. I hope everyone's enjoyed. Please leave any thoughts and feelings you have on what we've discussed in the comment section down below. Look forward to seeing your thoughts on it all. I'm Callum, and I still have an outro.
I'm Matt, and I'm sorry for the noise on my end. Maybe you couldn't hear it, but it was bothering me. And as soon as we're wrapping up, they stopped mowing the lawn. Isn't that great?
The Force works in mysterious ways. Evan Nova
Mhm.
95. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Goodbye.